2016 economic outlook is changing. Access to capital is declining, and inflated valuations are declining. That's something that you guys have all heard. What does that really mean to startups? We're here to talk to some amazing entrepreneurs from TiE Angels and TiE Launchpad portfolio companies to hear their views. I am Priya Rajan, Director at Silicon Valley Bank at Early Stage Banking Group, and we are primarily focused in pre-funded and seed-funded companies. We have Jeremy Almond, who's in the middle, founder and CEO of Paystand, Dr. Scott Wolf, founder and president of Aaron Medical, and Paul Walsh, founder and CEO of Medicert. Can each of you guys give a quick intro to your background and maybe like 30-second pitch about your company?
Sure. So thank you, Priya, for having me, and thank you, TiE. I'm a physician by training, but I've spent my career starting up medical device companies. I've started 7 companies to date. I've also been a venture capitalist with Prospect Venture Partners and Frazier Healthcare Ventures. My current company is Aaron Medical, which was funded by, in part, TiE Angels in the seed round. We're now a commercial stage company developing medical devices to improve nasal breathing. So instead of having surgery, you can use our device. It takes about a minute per nostril, and you go right back to your normal activities, but breathing better.
Great, thank you.
And my name is Jeremy Almond. I am the CEO of Paystand. Paystand is a business-to-business payment platform. We're about a 3-year-old startup that's primarily funded by micro venture funds like Servant Ventures, Streamline Ventures, and Sarah Ventures. And what I think, I've spent a bunch of my career in the enterprise space, and what I'm really excited about is financial services is getting completely disrupted, particularly in the enterprise space. So our company, Paystand, effectively helps billing and receivables and bringing things like paper check and other manual process that's been around for pre-internet and bringing it into the digital age. And I'm particularly excited, I think, because banking as a whole and commercial finance is getting completely disrupted by technology, and I think that's applicable besides just payments. It's also applicable to things like the funding environment, so it'll be a fun panel.
Great, thank you. Paul?
Hi, I'm Paul Walsh. My background includes internet and mobile. I joined AOL as a startup in Europe back in the mid-90s and was part of the team that launched products like AIM, internet radio, 56K modem speed. Later on worked for companies such as O2 and Telefonica. My last startup was a mobile software testing company, and I've helped to create a couple of internet and mobile standards at the W3C. My current startup, Medicert, is a cybersecurity company. So we basically help to add a layer of security to messaging services such as HipChat and Slack. And we also make it easy for developers to add a layer of security to their applications that have the ability to have web browsing inside the applications.
That's great. Thank you so much. Let's start with some burning questions that's out there. What is the outlook for 2016 that you guys see? Jeremy and Scott, if you guys want to comment.
Sure. I would say that if you look at 2016, there's certainly a market correction happening. It's not so much of a surprise, particularly I think in the seed and at the top end in the series sort of DE landscape. And so what you've seen in 2014 and 2015 was a lot of angel money came in at the early stage, and I think that really affected how fundraising was done. And then at the top end, you had private equity and hedge funds that were coming in, and that really changed the funding environment quite a bit. What my personal belief is, what hasn't changed a lot is actually the middle. So Series A, Series Bs, whatever letter we call those these days, those haven't changed fundamentally. And either way, I think great companies are still getting funded, but it's certainly, the landscape has changed. It's the last 3 years were different than the 5 years before that, and I think the next year or two is certainly going to look a little bit different than the last couple years.
That's great. Thank you. How about you, Scott?
So I have a little bit different take because I do medical devices and medical companies. So we had a bubble back in 2006 that popped. And since then, it has been very difficult to finance medical device companies through traditional means. So the number of VC firms got out of medical devices and used their remaining capital to support their portfolio companies. That being said, great companies are getting finance, and we're actually on an upswing this year, and I think next year it'll continue, that venture firms are getting back in the business. And a number of groups, different kind of groups, have jumped into the void. So there's angel financing out there for medical device companies that has increased dramatically, and there's also overseas sources of capital that have jumped into the void. So my company, Aaron Medical, we received angel financing for the first round, and then we received a convertible note from the government of Singapore, and our last round was also done by a foreign VC group.
It's great. It's great to hear different perspectives on this, especially because of the niches that you guys are in. Access to financing. I mean, that's one of the ones that's been highlighted as the biggest challenge. But we all know with the tightening capital requirements also comes like healthier focus on the sustainable businesses. So what do you guys think about that? I know it's kind of like yin and yang. So Paul, maybe your thoughts on this.
Can you repeat the question? I didn't quite understand.
Sure. Like access to financing has been a challenge, right? With that said, the tightening capital requirements always pressures, makes the companies focused on the healthier, more sustainable businesses. So,
I've gone through a number of slight downturns with seed capital raising. Last year, I started to raise the latest seed round just before everybody started to become unsure about what's happening. So it was particularly tough going through the latest round that we just closed at $1.2 million. And I noticed that a lot of investors were starting to hold back, not because there was a downturn or a bubble burst or issues, it was because they were unsure. And so I think what they're looking for this year is a little bit different to what they were looking for last year. So I think there is a kind of a good definition for seed and Series A. I think almost all investors that come in at the Series A round are looking for traction by way of either customers or revenue. There's very few investors that will come in at a Series A based on the potential of the based on the potential of your company. So it's a little bit tougher than what it was last year, but.
Yep. How about you, Jeremy? Any thoughts on that one?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a couple of things. What is a Series A today is dramatically different than what a Series A was, 5 years ago. So a lot of the funds, the classic Series A funds, have actually gotten much, much larger in size. And so there's just an economics question of how much capital can they deploy. And what that effectively does is that means that the bars to raise that capital actually goes up. So, if a classic Series A was $4 to $5 million, 5 years back, Series A's now are 10, 15 plus million dollars, which means you have to have a different level of your business metrics. And so I think that's one thing that affects companies that are sort of at our size, but there's other interesting things that are going on in the space too. So you have different types of capital that come in now. So you have things like AngelList, you have crowdfunding platforms, you have venture debt, you have different mechanisms that actually come in earlier. And so that just changes the dynamics. And I think entrepreneurs are just figuring out that the landscape's changed. It doesn't mean that there's not capital out there. It's just you have to think about it differently.
Yeah, that's great. I know we have something to touch on the funding sources as well. But prior to that, I know Paul touched up a little bit on the serial entrepreneurs, but I want to put Scott on the spot, specifically in regards to serial entrepreneurs. These guys are all serial entrepreneurs. Curious to hear from you, how has your experience differed now from the ones that you've done before?
Yeah, so it's a big difference. In previous companies, I'll take my last company, TiEcon, that I founded as an example, and that company does non-invasive fat removal. So when I had the idea of doing a company for non-invasive fat removal, I approached venture firms, and they said, we're interested, go build the company. And so I got financing to do that, or seed stage financing to find a technology that can do this. So what I identified was a market. When I identified a technology, the two venture firms said, okay, we're in for $7 million, and we closed the round. So it was all really planned out before we even had to go into, we never really had to go into a real financing round where I hit the street and gave presentations. Contrast that with my current company, Aaron Medical. I started the company, funded it in part by myself, and got angels like Tom Fogarty, who's well known in the medical device world, and TiE angels, but talked to 100 people for the angel round, put together a relatively small round of about $1 million, and started the company that with the idea of using that to get into human testing. So spending as little money as possible to get to the next inflection point. And at that time, went out again to raise a venture round and talked to a huge number of groups and got overseas investors for that. So the contrast is actually very stark and real.
That's very insightful. Thank you so much. Going back to Jeremy, so the funding sources, I think that is a question that I get quite a bit as well. Considering the current state of funding, the pullback, tightening, what are your thoughts on startups doing traditional funding, like a VC, with a potentially declining lower valuations or down rounds versus alternative sources of funding? I know this is going to be probably a debate right here, but we can start with either one of you. Go for it. Whoever wants to go first. Scott, if you want to do.
If you're
Do the
not,
honors,
okay,
yes.
I will. So in this round, we had, and I'm going to list them so you can tell how many different kinds of frogs I had to kiss in order to achieve this goal. TiE Angels, TiE Launchpad, Monte Vista, which is run by Venk, who also is part of TiE, the president of TiE. Sacramento Angels, Sierra Angels, Shake Adventures from Israel, and a couple of individuals, including the founder of Kayak and Travelocity. So a lot of meetings, a lot of individuals, a lot of groups. And I think you have to, as a founder, it's in your best interest to kind of work out very quickly whether you're talking to the right kind of people or not. It's very easy to decipher between an investor who is a seed or a Series A. Are you pre-revenue, pre-customer, or not? It's very simple. So many investors say, yep, we're early stage seed, but we want to see traction and revenue. And it's kind of really blurring the lines and making it difficult for founders. And I think investors should be a little bit more clear up front very quickly what stage of the business they're willing to invest in.
Yep, great.
Yeah, and I would say maybe to key in on that, one of the things that's changed a lot is at least at the early stage, funding is no longer a discrete event, but it's a process. So particularly, I would say at the seed stage, there's angel, friends and family, pre-seed, seed, post-seed, seed prime, pre-A, it's crazy. But what I think the good thing about that part is for entrepreneurs, there's more information than ever. And so, you're going along a long ride. So if you're taking the long view of building a company for a very, very long time, you want folks that you're going to both be feel like actually can help enable the business and are great matches. And so now it's a lot harder for the entrepreneur to say, oh, I didn't know what I was getting into, because you have a lot of information out there to actually know what kind of investor you're choosing. So if you're looking for an angel investor and you see everything that he's got on angel list, you know what kinds of investments he's done. If you are looking at a firm, you can sort of tell what their firm is. If you're looking at alternative sources and you're just thinking, okay, all I really need is capital and I don't need actually that experience, and maybe you do crowdfunding. If you've got actual revenue, maybe you start doing venture debt, right? So you have a lot of options. In our day and age, that means there's lots of choice, but I actually think that's a great thing. So
I totally agree.
Yeah, I think I have a little different view in that I don't think there is alternative financing anymore. Alternative financing is financing, and we talk to everybody for each round and let them tell us, okay, we're not interested, this doesn't fit, but having thick skin and hearing people say no is important. So hedge funds are doing what venture funds used to do. People are taking venture debt at different times in the product cycle than they used to. So, and along with what Jeremy said, we used to say that we have 5 closings a week. You can close any day of the week with us. So.
Can I just tag on to the end of that? I think what I've learned is that it's extremely important to find a really good, confident lead who is willing to introduce you to other investors within their network and have that confidence in you as a founder and as a team. And to Prashant's credit from TiE Launchpad, he opened up his address book and introduced me to a number of people who then led to more investment, and we got the momentum extraordinarily quickly. And just to add one last thing without kind of dissing AngelList, I think AngelList is fantastic. I didn't try to raise money on AngelList, but what I've learned is that it's great for some people if you can find your lead investor offline and then go online, or find a super hot super angel who's going to promote you online. It's going to be extremely difficult to impossible to raise on this side.
Yep, agreed. And I think you touched a little bit on this. You're all a part of TiE family, and I'm proud to be a TiE charter member myself. So how has that helped you to where you are today? I'd love to hear how has your experiences been?
Yeah, it's been great. We actually got a board member from TiE Angels that represents the TiE Angel investment, Kern Bugra, and he's been extremely helpful in all. He's been a medical device entrepreneur himself, so he's been very helpful.
Yeah, I guess what I would say is I've seen quite a lot of software startups in the last 3 years treat the early stage funding almost like commodity, and whether or not you raise money on an AngelList platform directly or not, the rolling closes that happen with angels means that there's a number of companies that end up with 100 people on their cap table that they've talked to one time. And actually, money is not a commodity, because the biggest thing you can actually have to help your business is get really smart people around to help the business go forward. So I think we were really purposeful about who did we align with. And in TiE's case, we were one of the first, I think we were part of the first batch of TiE Launchpad, which is their accelerator. And we spent a lot of time digging into the business, having mentors around who are actually, in our case, in payment space, in enterprise infrastructure, that came alongside of us and really thought about, okay, how do you guys go to market? How do you price this? And that's inevitable, and that's like, you can't put a dollar on that. And even if you could go to some crowdfunding platform and raise a bunch of money, it wouldn't displace the fact that having really, really great anchor investors is extremely important. And I think TiE has done a phenomenal job with that.
So, ironically, my wife is actually Indian, and it'll become ironic in a second, but she's Indian, and she started the venture capital business for Microsoft here in the Valley about 14 years ago. And in that role, she was TiE's first global sponsor, and she was one of the founding charter members. And it turns out when we moved her to the Valley, she ended up later on securing most of our donations for our charity in Ireland. And I ended up securing the vast majority of our investment from Indians here, thanks to the TiE network. So it's worked out extremely good for me.
That's awesome, thank you. And I think this is another question that is there all the time. Now it's all about burn, watch your burn. So how can startups balance between managing their cash burn and having strong unit economics and showing clear path to profitability? I think it's kind of difficult to have all three. So how do you guys suggest startups do this?
Yeah, I think I said it before, but keeping the burn low in the beginning, as low as possible, so you keep out of the financing world, is incredibly important. And so that's what we were able to do with Aaron, doing everything we could with two people. It costs a lot to get a medical device to market, at least 40 million or so, but my companies have raised over $100 million to do it. So we know we're going to be raising a lot of money in the future, so getting to the milestones that we can raise at a higher valuation is very important.
Great. Jeremy?
Yeah, I think one of the dangers for founders is to think about funding as a milestone in general. Funding really is an accelerant for the business you're already building, right? And if you already have the strong unit economics you're working on, then funding is just a source to take what you were planning on doing in 3 years and move it to 8 months or whatever, right? And the danger is right now, and I think this is actually a good correction that's happening. The unicorn culture basically said, okay, we're going to treat funding as these milestones, and then we're going to spend way more money on customer acquisition that's absolutely insane, and we're going to over invest in hiring, and it creates a lopsided culture. And so what I think is actually going on right now is really good, because great companies oftentimes are actually built, particularly in the early stage when things are super focused, in times when there's constraint. So when you build a company around constraint and then you add fuel to the fire, that's a good place to be. And maybe for a little while things were the other way around. So I actually am really excited about where the market's at right now.
Yep.
I think you just have to learn the hard way. My last company, I just spent way too much money on everything in stupid places. I spent too much money on PR, too much money on marketing. Just ridiculous. So it now just comes natural for me to assume that just because the money is there, you don't spend it.
Yeah.
And because I've been through so many different struggles, ups and downs with MetaCert and other companies, but you realize that you're going to need the money to last a lot longer than what you first anticipated, and hire people based on their skills and talents rather than necessarily their location. So some of my core people are outside of the US.
That's great.
It makes it more difficult when it comes to brainstorming and creativity, but there's a trade-off if you can actually make it work.
Yep.
But you have to learn the hard way, I think.
Yep, great. I'm looking at some of the questions. Feel free to put questions in your Q&A panel. I have 2 questions out here. So one is for Dr. Scott. What is your opinion on the use of crowdfunding for consumer medical device startups? That's a great question.
It's a great question. For consumer medical device products, it's a great idea. I don't have any experience with it because it hasn't been used for FDA-regulated medical devices. So I see. So for wearables, for anything consumer-based where there isn't a regulatory hurdle or a HIPAA hurdle where there's transfer of information, of medical information, it's a great idea.
Great. I have another one right here for a self-funded B2C mobile app startup. What should be our funding strategy? Maybe Jeremy and Paul can take this.
Go for it.
Well, I mean, I think the first thing is where's your business at, right, and your business strategy. So on the B2C side, first, if you're pre-funding, I think the core thing to think about is getting a product out there. So nowadays, it's maybe a trite statement to say that the cost of getting a company out there has gone down. It has. It's still hard, but there's an expectation now. You have to have a product ready before you're going to even raise a pre-seed. And then at that point, you really need to think about what the traction numbers are. So I think some of the best innovation on B2C companies right now are around figuring out really clever distribution mechanisms. So when I see seed companies on the B2C and mobile side getting funded right now, it tends to be because they've come up with some really awesome distribution mechanism. So maybe they don't have 10 million users right now, but they're growing at some crazy month-over-month clip, and it's all out of some really clever distribution mechanism. So I think when you have those things, the money comes pretty quickly. The other thing I would say is funding is actually, especially at the early days, despite what kind of happens on panels, is really hard until it's not hard. It's just this funny thing where getting your first anchor investor tends to be really hard, and then it just sort of picks up momentum. So I think once you have the milestones, once you have those pieces, you can find the anchor guys, and then the anchor guys will really help you get momentum.
Great.
So it sounds like they're very early, and I've got a very, very easy metric to go with, which is either raise when you've got absolutely no data whatsoever, or raise when you have phenomenal data, because if you have any data whatsoever and it's not fantastic, it's going to go against you until it is great. So you're going to struggle even more. So to an extent, that means you should probably raise a little bit earlier, but focus on obviously the usual stuff, right? The problem, the solution, all of that. But the main thing is actually product now needs to be beautiful. People's expectations are a lot higher now when it comes to product. So a beautifully designed mock-up of what the product could look like, if it's beautifully designed and it solves that problem, I think that is probably the best time to raise money, because if you build a demo and if you've got customers, great, but if you've got no customers, you're screwed.
Great. Hopefully that was helpful. Feel free to put more questions if you guys have any. We have a few more minutes, so I have one other question right here. So access to talent. I know it's kind of related to funding, but not. But I want to throw it out there. Access to talent has been kind of number one issue for startups, and I've seen it come over and over again. So what are your thoughts on it? And we can go.
It's less of an issue in the medical device world. So because there's been less companies started, so the talent pool is actually, this is the best place in the world to get the talent, and it's pretty consistently available.
Yeah, I would say it's hard, to be honest. Right now, and maybe it's getting a little bit easier, but certainly when there's a lot of funding in the space, you're competing with everybody for talent. So I think the approach we take is finding people that are really aligned with the mission. So why do you do what you do? Where are you guys going in the long run? In our case, who's crazy enough to think you can disrupt the financial services space, right? And the good news is now, because there's more information, you can find people that have a lot of alignment, but you have to put a lot of work into it. So I personally spend a lot of time recruiting, and it's a core part of our team. And so it's not simply a matter of putting up a job rec and having 1,000 10x engineers just apply. There's work you've got to do and think about.
It is tough. There is a shortage of tech people in the tech world right now in Silicon Valley, but there's actually slightly more people out there than what you think, because we have this preconception of who we're looking for before we even posted the job. I'm the only white person on my team, and so if you're just naturally open to hiring whoever they are based on their skills, and some people don't actively go out of their way to go against certain ethnic minorities, but they do, right? That's why companies like Facebook and Twitter hire heads of diversity. I mean, that's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. Everybody should be thinking about that, or it should come natural to everybody. I just hired today a female developer who just came from India and self-taught coding online, and is one of the best talented developers I've come across. So you just need to be open to hiring people from whatever background they have and base it on their skills. That's great. A good step. I mean, everything else is cliche.
That's great. Thank you. We have quite a few questions, so we'll see how many we can get through. The question is, what is more important, customer acquisition or revenue for a sports social media app? Who wants to take that question?
Well, you have to have customers to get revenue. So the cliche again is find customers, make them extremely happy, find out why they're happy, and build a business from there. The old saying goes, 100 extremely happy customers are better than 1 million customers that install your application and 99% disappear. The revenue will follow. That's always the case, right?
Agreed. I think, Jeremy, any thoughts on that one?
Yeah, I mean, I think revenue in some cases, particularly in the enterprise, can be a lagging indicator, but you do want to think about your unit economics. I think the unit economics are extremely key. So how much does it cost to acquire a customer? Where do those customers come from? What's the profile of the customer? What do they look like? Where are you selling into? If it's a consumer company, where are you pulling those? What's the growth hacking mechanism? So I think those things you need to know, and then obviously the other side is the product, the customer success side of the product. So how are you measuring that the customers are sticking around? How are you measuring that their churn is going down? I think when you have those, then revenue just kind of naturally falls up and to the right. And until you have those things, then you're just sort of filling a leaky bucket.
Yep. And I think there's another one. Is it harder for a hardware startup to raise money compared to a software? It's a niche question, so.
Well, everybody seems to think it is in Silicon Valley. The answer is probably yes, but Liam Casey is known as Mr. China in Silicon Valley, an Irish entrepreneur who makes the Beats headphones and so on. He's got a hardware accelerator in San Francisco. So that person, if they want an introduction, I can make an introduction if that's a specific question.
Okay, we can take it offline. So I think we're about time, 30 seconds left, so thank you again. Thanks for your time today. I mean, it's been great discussion, great to hear all of your thoughts, especially from different niches and different, your experiences coming in. So again, to summarize, capital is tightening, inflated valuations are declining. But I think that is prompting the companies to adjust to a more balanced and funding environment and focus on the fundamentals. I think that's what I'm hearing a lot from you guys. There's definitely still a very healthy focus on building sustainable business. So the message I get is to be cautiously optimistic. Right?
Great.
Thank you so much. Thanks
Cheers.
again.
Thanks,
Thank
guys.
you.